Greetings from Serbia. Welcome to the NT podcast, Science and Theology, where science and theology come together through thought-provoking and engaging conversations. I'm your host, Nemanja Jurišić, and today we are honored to have Dr. Bernard Faye, one of the leading experts on camels. Welcome.
Thank you.
Okay, for our audience, Dr. Bernard Faye holds an impressive academic background. He earned his doctorate in veterinary medicine from Lyon, France, in 1974. Building on this, he completed a Master of Science in Animal Nutrition and Endocrinology in 1980, followed by a PhD from Paris University in 1995. His expertise was further recognized in 1998 when he achieved his HDR, the French Researcher Capacity Qualification at Montpellier University. So, Dr. Faye, do you want to say something more about yourself and your projects, academic papers, and other stuff?
Well, regarding academic courses, no, I don't have anything to add. But just to say that my experience as a vet, it is a tropical experience. And I spent important part of my life in Africa, in Middle East. And I visited so many countries where they are rearing camel. So I have a good experience regarding the camel farming system through the world, I will say from Mauritania up to China.
Amazing. We will explore everything from the origins and evolution of camels and their historical uses, and the intriguing question on whether their mention in the Bible is an anachronism. This will be a fascinating discussion for everyone passionate about the intersection of science, history, and faith. But before we begin, make sure to hit subscribe to follow our channel, like this video, and leave a comment. Your feedback means a lot to us. So my first question, Dr. Faye, what is the origin of camels? Where do they come from? How did they migrate to different continents? And what is the general evolutionary development of camels throughout history?
Okay, so in fact, the camel is belonging to a family of animals. We call it the Camelidae. And the camelids, they have two main groups. One group, it is a lamini group, which is llama, alpaca, vigonia, and guanaco living in the South America. And the second group, it is camelini group, which is living in Asia, in Africa nowadays, with the two main species, domestic main species, which is a Bactrian camel with two hump, and dromedary camel with one hump. But this family is from North America, especially from Canada, 40 million years ago. And from this nucleus of the ancestor of the actual camelids, you have these two groups who are separated geographically. One group migrate to the South America, and the evolution was go to the small camelids, adapted to the high mountains. And the second group has migrated through the Bering Strait up to Asia. And here you have a first sharing between two groups, also two species. One species which is a common ancestor of Bactrian and dromedary, and one which is the actual wild camel. The wild camel is living in the desert, Gobi Desert, between China and Mongolia. And we know now since less than 20 years that it is a different species, because for a long time we believe that it was a Bactrian camel go back to the wild, but it's not true. It is really a different species, was separate from the Bactrian camel. And from the common ancestor of Bactrian dromedaries, there was two groups. One migrate to the probably to the Central Asia, where he was domesticated. And we think that the double-humped camel, the Bactrian camel, was domesticated in somewhere between Aral Sea and Caspian Sea, and probably 3,000 years before Christ. It's been 5,000 years from now. And the dromedary migrate to the Arabian Peninsula, and where it was domesticated. And the domestication probably occurred in 2000 years before Christ. And it is interesting to note that there is probably now, there is two focus of domestication of the dromedary. And this is interesting regarding biblical time, because one first focus was in the south of Arabian Peninsula, actually between Saudi Arabia, Oman, and Emirate, in Hadramaut and Rub al-Khali Desert. It is in the south part of the Arabian Peninsula. That is was the first focus of domestication of the dromedary. And the second focus is interesting because it is probably in Shat el-Arab. Shat el-Arab, it is the delta of the Tigre and Euphrates, the two main rivers of Mesopotamia. And here, you had a Bactrian camel, double-humped camel, coming. There was domesticated since 1,000 years. And they came up to Babylon and to Baghdad through trade route by caravan. And this Bactrian has found dromedary, wild dromedary. And there was crossbreed between double-humped and one-humped. And probably the domestication of dromedary in the northern part of Saudi Arabia and in the southern part of actual Iraq and Kuwait was due to the crossbreeding between wild dromedary and domestic Bactrian. And this has been noted by different epigraphic books that we can find at the biblical time, especially. And actually, we know that there is a genetic difference between the dromedary from the southern part of Saudi Arabia, for example, and those from the northern part of Saudi Arabia. After the domestication, it was 2,000 years before Christ, the dromedary migrates through Sinai and occupy all the north of Africa. That it is probably the population which was in the north of the Saudi Arabia, actual Saudi Arabia. In the south, you have another migration by the man, and this migration was made by boat, and the dromedary domesticated in the south, they come to the Horn of Africa, actual Somalia, Ethiopia, Kenya, and Sudan. So it's been in Africa, you have the two group of dromedary, those coming from the north, those coming from the south. And during the history, due to the caravan between the north and south of Sahara, the gene pool of these two populations mixed completely, and we have a specific population now in Africa, which is different than the two populations originate from Arabian Peninsula. That is briefly the history of the large camelid and the domestication of the camelids. Sorry.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Dr.
A bit
Faye.
flu.
Yeah, nice. I understand. So let's cover this question. But you already answered, but let's be clear about this. Is it an anachronism in the Bible when camels are mentioned in the story of Abraham? Is it possible that Abraham possessed camels as described in Genesis 12:16 or Genesis 24:10 when Abraham's servant goes with camels to find Isaac's future wife?
Yeah. I have read this. This aspect, not directly in a Bible, but in a book regarding archaeologists and epigraphic remain. And yes, it is absolutely possible because, you know, at the biblical time, the camel were present, the double-humped camel and the dromedary camel and probably hybrid were largely present in all Middle East. And you know, there was a caravan, the incense trade route, the caravan bringing the incense from the south of the Arabian Peninsula. They go by caravan. Uh, Even before the Nabatean. Nabatean, it was between 500 years before Christ up to 500 after, during the Roman time. But these caravans, they exist for a long time because I know that they describe at the Solomon time, King Solomon time. So it means this caravan bringing the incense was before the Roman Empire, and it is, for me, is not a surprise to see these words because um, probably the camel was already domesticated 2000 years before Christ, and the Arab tribe was domesticated, the dromedary, were used as a warrior also in a different war, all in the Middle East, and they occupy also the Palestine, and they went up to Jerusalem. So for me, there is no surprise regarding this this assertion, this statement.
Thank you so much. And what would your colleagues say about this? Would they agree, or is there a debate about this topic?
Yes, yeah, you know, regarding the history, you know, how we can base our judgment as a scientist, and I don't say as a religious man, but as a scientist. We are based on the epigraphic. Epigraphy, it means, for example, the rock carving. We have a lot of rock carving in the Arabian Peninsula and the Middle East, which represent the camel. And they represent domestic camel. That is easy to know because they use the camel. When they represent the camel is used for milking, is used for packing, Avon is used for riding. So it means it was domesticated. And we know how with archaeological measurement that this rock carving has 3,000, 4,000 years old. So there is no doubt regarding this aspect. We have also rock carving which has oldest up to 7,000, 8,000 years old. But in that case, the rock carving represents wild camel. It's mean because we don't see any human close to the camel in this representation. And probably we can situate the domestication of dromedary around 2000 before Christ. And as I say, in the two focus, and the use of this camel in all Middle East, probably at the beginning of the domestication as a riding animal. You know, the camel is the animal of the nomad. It's especially it was the animal of the Arab tribe. And this Arab tribe, they was used as a warrior in all the kingdom in Middle East since that the Arabian people, they have domesticated the camel. It means the camel, it was moving in all the Middle East. And even historically, we know that it's moving up to Europe because we have found bones of camel all along the Roman way in Europe up to Germany, Belgium, north of France, Switzerland, probably Serbia also. There is some archaeological site during the Roman Empire which shows that they use already camel as a packing animal. So in all this region, from Middle East up to Europe, the camel was used for at the biblical time.
All right. What do you think about this comment? Let me quote. Recent excavations in the Timna Valley discovered what may be the earliest bones of domesticated camels found in Israel or even outside the Arabian Peninsula, dating to around 930 BCE. Do you agree with this quote, or would you challenge this?
Yeah, probably it's true. Huh? Probably it's true. Huh? Uh, because yeah, as I say, this animal is moving a lot. He's moving a lot with nomad people, and it was adopted by many population in the Middle East. It was adopted because it was more easier to use the camels and the horse at that time for as a packing animal and even as a riding animal. It was easier to use it because we are in desert and especially in arid areas, the camel was less adapted than the camel for riding. And I think it was used for a long time in all this area.
Okay, so bones are not proof that they exist at that place as domesticated animals, but we have other evidences. So, what evidence would you provide to show that domesticated camels were at the time of Abraham, let's say 1750 BC to 2000 BC, let's say?
There is different proof. There is also we found some how do you say in English some small statues and in ceramic. For example, I know that in Israel, in the Museum of Tel Aviv, you have a representation of ceramic, which dated more than 1,000 years before Christ, and representing camel with packing. So it was used, and also we know there was a lot of trade, especially. I speak about the incense road, which is very old because probably the incense road they start with Saba Queen and at the time of Solomon, but before also, and also we have trade route. The Silk Road but it start in the Silk Road start probably 400 years before Christ, huh? And the Silk Road they come from China up to the Mediterranean coast. And that explains there is also a trade from Babylon, Baghdad, actual Iraq, actual Kuwait, north of Arabia. Even we have rock carving in Saudi Arabia representing double-humped camel. So it's very old rock carving presentation. It's mean in all this area we have proof, especially we have proof rock carving, we have some papyrus also mentioning this, and we have some stone mentioning some battle where the people they use camel. And this stone has been dated more than 1,500 years old. And at my knowledge, one of the oldest fresco representing camel it was during the Sumerian War in 1200 or 300 BC. So it's been, for me, there is evidence, there's so many evidence, archaeological evidence, epigraphic evidence, literacy evidence that the camel was present in all this area long time before the Christ era.
Nice. So you would agree with your colleague Pamela Berger. She said that domestication of camels begin at, let me read, she's quote. She says, camel domestication has started 3,000 to 4,000 years ago. Therefore, it could be possible that they are mentioned in the context of Abraham. But she says it's possible. Would you say it's probable, maybe? An even stronger statement.
Ah, because we have only some archaeological remain. We have only some small, I mean, small evidence. Okay. But it is true for all the animals. You know, one element was saying that this animal, especially if we found bones, when you find the bones of a camel, how we can distinguish the domestic from the wild one? And one element is the size of the animal. We know in all the type of animal, it is the same for sheep, for goat, for whatever, for cow. When the animal are domesticated, their size is decreasing. And in fact, we compare the archaeology, they compare the size of the bones. And according to the size, they say, this one was still hunted, this means it was wild, and this one was already domesticated. But of course, the domestication process is also something which is on a long history. You know, it is not from 1 year to another year. The domestication process is for many centuries. Probably the process starts one day, and the animal, we can consider the animal completely domesticated after 500, 600, maybe 1,000 years, because it is a very long process. Uh, at the beginning, you know, the animal, the people, they catch the animal, they give some food, but the animal are still wild. And we know genetically that when you want to select animal for keeping as a domestic, you change completely the gene because you select your animal for reproduction, and you select animal according to the possibilities they have to not be afraid by the man. That is more important things. And they are also very, they are being adapted to live in the herd with the human. So it's been this aspect, it's a long process of selection of the animal. So it's not in 1 year or 2 years, but it's a long process. And one proof also, it is some papyrus in Egypt. You know, for example, in Egypt, during the Pharaoh, there was no representation of camel in hieroglyph. You have never camel in hieroglyph. The first representation camel in the Egyptian empire, it was around 500, 600 before Christ. It's been more recently because the camel did not migrate through Sinai before. Only there is some papyrus, very old papyrus, they mention the presence of camel 1,000 years before Christ in Egypt, in the eastern part of Egypt, up to the delta of Nile. But they mention as a caravan. They did not mention as a reared animal. There was no camel breeding in Egypt at the Pharaoh time, but there was already caravan, there was already some trade. And if you have trade with caravan, it means the camel is domesticated. You cannot make a caravan with a wild animal.
Yeah, good point. Thank you so much. So here are evidences. Let me read and tell me, do you agree with that, or can you say something more about each? So a camel fossil was discovered in a settlement dating to the period of 2000 BC to 1400 BC. Do you agree with this?
Yes, yes, he's right.
Okay,
We have
next,
some,
yeah.
yes, it is right. There is some skeleton, some archaeological skeleton, which has been isolated, and also some rock carving, very old rock carving. Recently, we discovered, you know, rock carving in the north of Saudi Arabia, close to Ajuf, with representing camel, very big camel, more than the actual camel. and the date was something like 7 to 8,000 years old. And we consider that it was a hunted camel. It means they represent camel to be hunted. So it means they were wild. So it means the presence of the camel in this area was very old. Probably the common ancestor of Bactrian and dromedary goes through the Bering Strait probably 2 to 3 million years ago. So, you know, the evolution was very long, but the migration through that year. The problem that, you know, we need to find skeleton, the skeleton, whole skeleton, to prove this migration. And recently, a lot of discovering has been done in Central Asia. And we know, for example, in Syria also, we have found, some archaeologists have found a giant camel. It means a camel with more than 3 meters high. It is a giant camel. It was wild, of course, and it is probably the direct ancestor of the dromedary. And it has found we have found maybe in the years 80, something like this, in Syria, in actual Syria. It means the ancestor of dromedary was already present maybe 100,000 years before Christ. So it's a long time. It's a long history.
Awesome. Next evidence is a camel jawbone was found in a tomb from the Middle Bronze Age in Tel Elahu, dating to 1900 to 1550 BCE. Is it true?
But it is in Saudi Arabia, no? It is Emirate, actual Emirate.
Mhm.
Yeah.
So you agree with this?
Yeah. I have read a paper about this. Yes, absolutely. Yeah.
Okay.
Now
Next, yeah.
we can date with some precision, you know. Yeah, yes, it's true.
Okay, next, in northern Syria, a cylinder seal from the 13th century BC depicting deities riding a camel was discovered. So, what those deities represent, and is it evidence that camels were domesticated in that time or not?
Yes, because you know the representation was with a riding camel, and we know that the camel was used in, especially in war because they have been used to transport the weapon, and sometimes also to transport the warrior. And in Ajuf Museum, in the north of Saudi Arabia, you can see the representation of one of the oldest fresco representing camel ridden by warrior and some camel bringing some weapon. So it's been they use as a domestic animal. And to use as domestic animal at that time, it was more than 1,000 years BC. It means they were domesticated since more time. It's been maybe since a century. You know, for me, there is no doubt about this.
Okay, thank you again. So, camels are mentioned in the Sumerian lexical work Ura Habulu. I don't know how to pronounce, which dates to back to early second millennium BCE.
Wow. Well,
So,
I will tell you something. I don't know because maybe I don't know this point, but there is something interesting. How you say the origin
uh,
of the name of camel?
yeah, this is Sumerian lexical work Ura Hubulu.
Ura, it's a Somalian word. Yeah, but
Yeah,
the origin of the name of camel, you know, uh, for that we understand that so this animal was present since a very long time. Why? Because the first alphabet is from Sumerian time, And Sumer, so civilization in Sumer, it is around 2000, 3000, 5000 BC, approximately 3000 before Christ, the Sumerian civilization. And the first alphabet from Sumerian, I know only the three first letter. The first one, Aleph, the second was Beta, Bet, and the third was Gamel. The letter C, it represents the hump of the camel. The first letter represents the hump of the camel. After, as the evolution, this letter move, and you have the C now, which is open to the right side, but the C is representing the hump of the camel. And this letter is pronounced Gamel. Still now, the Arabic people, they say Gamel or Gamma. We say Gamaru. In Sumerian, they say Gamaru. And in Greek alphabet, it's become Gamma. And in European language, in English, it's camel. In France, it's a chameau. In German, it's camelen. In Spanish, it's camello. So, and except in the Slav language is different. In Russian is verblut, but all the language from Middle East and from Europe, the Western Europe, is the same root. Even in Somalia, Ura in Somalia, it is a breed. It's not the name of camel. In Somalia, we say Gala. It's the same root. In Ethiopian, we say Gali. In Arabic, we say Jamel. So it means you can find the same root of the word camel. So, and it's coming from Sumerian alphabet. It means at Sumerian time, camel was very important. The first word, the first letter is alpha, which is Aleph. Aleph is a cow, is a bull, and it represents the bull like this, reverse. And when you reverse, it is a cap hay, And bet, the house, is beta is a house, is represented by two, because the house at that time was round, the roof, so it is a bed, and it become a bee, beta in Greek, and B in Europe, and that is a house. And still now, the house in Arabic, it is Bethlehem is the house of lamb. Okay, so when you see the history of alphabet, you understand what is the most important things for this population. And you can see that the camel is the third letter of the alphabet, so it means it was already important at Sumerian time. So it's mean a long time ago.
Yeah, this is really interesting. And in our language, we say Camila. So, yeah. Okay. In northwestern Arabia, a camel figurine was found in a tomb from the late 13th century BCE, and a camel is also depicted on a pottery fragment from the same period. Is it correct?
Yeah, yes, it's correct. Yes, absolutely. As I told you, there is a lot of figurine and pottery, very old, and it's possible to date now, and we know it's very old. Yeah.
Amazing. And last one evidence on a pottery fragment from the 13th or early 12th century BCE in a Midian, a broken camel figurine was found, while a camel is also depicted on a fragment from the 13th century BCE at Pi Ramses.
Where? Pi Ramses? Yeah, I don't know specifically this figurine.
Yeah, so Pi Ramses is a cantir in Delta Nile.
Yeah, but I believe it. I believe it, no problem, because myself, I have seen some figurine of very old camel, and they were with a saddle. So if you represent a camel with a saddle, it means it's domesticated. So
But mass domestication, would you say it's in Canaan or at least in Israel from 1000 BCE? Would you agree with that? But we have exceptions before that even.
No, because you know, as I said before, the camel was used as a moving animal, especially for trade, mainly for trade, for war and for trade. And the invasion of camel in the world nowadays was linked historically to the use of camel in the trade. As even we can now, with genetic, and Pamela Burger probably tell you because she published a very good paper on it, we can see the trade route of camel through the gene, actual gene. And we can find some gene, even we can find some gene of Bactrian camel, it means a double rampant, in some population dromedary in Middle East. It means there was a crossbreed all along the trade route. And the trade, where they are going, the trade route, up to where they are going to the trade route, they are going to the Mediterranean coast. They are going up to Jerusalem. And they were going also up to Constantinople. And even probably they will go up to Roma and the Roman Empire. So it's been for a long time, the camel was present in all, uh, of course, Arabian Peninsula because the origin, but they use all the Middle East area because it was animal of the trade, animal of the exchange, animal of the mobility of the nomad and the warrior and the merchant. So for that, I'm not surprised to see this camel everywhere. Even if it is, probably as origin, it was bred only by Arab tribe. But as I see the actual change, in Africa, this animal has been adopted by population from the Near East easily because they are used as a packing animal for eventually not necessarily riding, but for packing animal.
Okay, so would you disagree with Israel Finkelstein? He says in his book Bible Unearthed, page 37, we now know through archaeological research that camels were not domesticated as beasts of burden earlier than the late second millennium and were not widely used in that capacity in the ancient Near East until well after 1000 BC. Do you disagree with him or what?
But it's limited to Israel. It's limited geographically to Israel. I don't know, really, I don't know, because, but I think probably there was no camel before 2000 years, 2000 years BC. In the eastern part, western part of the Near East, because it was limited to Arabian Peninsula. But there was probably some, I mean, presence of some animals. But the people, they did not breed it. They did not breed it. It was used by Arab people, but the Arab people, especially in the north of Arabian people, it was warrior, and they was used only for war and for trade. But they go to Jerusalem, for example, the trade, the caravans, they go to Jerusalem probably at 1500 BC, or probably before, mainly before, but there was not breed in this area. It is like in Egypt, as I said before, there was no representation in hieroglyph because the camel was not bred in Egypt. He came in Egypt, he came to Jerusalem, he came to Turkey, actual Turkey, he came in all this area by trade, by caravan, and they go back. So people, they don't breed them. And that is very important because for that, when they don't breed themselves, they don't consider They say it's like exotic animal, you know. Even if they are domestic before, they come as exotic animal. And this later, it was adopted by the population. You know, I can make a parallel with what happened actually in Africa. In West Africa. In Africa, also camel was reared by nomad people from Sahara, Tuareg, Tubu, Afar, Somali. So all these people, they rear camel. But with a climatic change, you can see camel going in the southern part of the country. And now you have camel in Nigeria, in Uganda, in Tanzania, place where there was no camel 20 years or 30 years ago. But it's not the nomad who was coming. It is the people, local people, who adopt the camel as a new animal according to the new situation, climatic situation. And probably at the history in the Middle East, the Arab people, they come with their camel up to Jerusalem, up to Sinai, up to the Nile, up in Egypt, in all these parts, and they come back. And the camel was not used at the beginning by the local population, but after some times, 1 century, 2 century, 3 century, he was adopted. And in that case, you will find representation in papyrus, you will find representation in rock carving or in figurine and so on. For that, I don't know in Israel when it was adopted by the population exactly, but if we say before 1000 or 1500 years before Christ, there is no mention. Maybe the camel was present, but not adopted by the population, not yet.
Okay, Dr. Faye, thank you. And how you comment the story of Joseph when camels are mentioned in the context of Ishmaelite and Midianite caravans traveling to Egypt to sell Joseph in Genesis 37:25. Do you consider this an anachronism?
No, it's okay. No, it's
It's
not anachronism. No, it's. I told you, it's totally possible. It's totally possible. According to that, we know the presence of the camel in this area.
Okay, sorry for repeating some stuff, but I need just a clear answer. So I want to ask this. So next one is about Jacob. That's a little earlier in Genesis 30, 43, 31, 34, 32, 15, where Jacob's herd is described alongside Laban's, and camels are included. Rachel hid idols in the camel's saddle and sat on them. Jacob sent 30 milking camels with their colts. Do you consider this accurate? 30 camels, is it realistic or what?
But it's not. It's possible. You say milking. That it is interesting because milking camel, the use of camel as a milking animal was probably started almost at the beginning of domestication. But it was not the main purpose of the camel breeding. But it started probably at the same time because concretely, it was the only species what was in the desert were able to provide milk. Of course, there was sheep, very few cow, and there is of course sheep and goat, but sheep and goat don't give so much milk. And probably the milking of camel was used at the beginning of the domestication. So me, I'm not surprised to say that to see that. Huh? You know, I have seen in the rock carving because I make a trip recently in the north of Saudi Arabia, close to Egrat. So it's mean the Saudi Petra. Huh? We call it the Saudi Petra. We have seen some rock carving representing milking camel. So it's been it was used and it is 2000. It was probably just at the beginning of the Christian era or just before, but it means they use already the camel as a milking animal. But we don't have so much representation of milking animal. Why? Because the people, the nomad, they use mainly for caravan, and in the caravan, you cannot use a milking animal because you have to have the baby with the camel, so difficult to manage. So it's not very important representation. But for me, I'm not surprised by this discovery.
All right, thank you, Dr. Faye. And in Mosaic law, eating camels is forbidden in Leviticus 11:4, Deuteronomy 14:7, and camels are mentioned as one of the animals that perished during the 10 plagues. If we accept these events as occurring around 1250 BC, according to consensus, would you consider this an anachronism for that period and region?
No, but it's, you know, before domestication, the camel was hunted. If it was hunted, it means the people, they are accustomed to eat camel. So, yeah, I'm not surprised to see that because, but still again, uh, the camel meat was consumed by the nomad people. Probably in the town, the idea to eat camel meat came later, especially in the Near East. Uh, we speak about Jerusalem. I think in Jerusalem, the people they don't want to eat camel at the beginning of the domestication. It was really the meat of the nomad. But when they adopt the animal, probably it's coming step by step to the consumption of camel meat, as for camel milk anyway. So there is a difference, between the use of camel as a pack animal for trade and the use of camel for production, for milk and meat. And when you use animal for production, it means you have a breeders, camel breeders. And in the Near East, in the Near East, at the beginning, the people were not camel breeders. They see camel coming, okay, but they are not necessarily consumers. And they become consumer probably later. It's mean not at 2000 years before Christ, but mainly probably in less important later in the history. For example, Nabatean people, well, it's around the Christ era. The Nabatean people they consume camel meat, and they consume camel meat. That we know that. We have some proof of this.
Do you have an idea why Moses or whoever forbids those eating camels? Is there any idea or?
But as I told you, probably it's because the Jude were not camel breeders, and they look the camel as exotic animal coming from desert, and I think because I think there is no reason, there is no dietetic reason to say we cannot eat camel. There is dietetic reason for pig, for example. There is dietetic reason because it's not animal moving, there is some parasite, but for camel there is no reason. So my only opinion that it was considered as exotic animal and probably as a wild animal also. And maybe the people they adopt the animal as a packing, but not for producing producing meat. I'm sorry, I'm so big flu.
Oh, sorry about that. Okay, we will head to the end this interview just about camels during the time of Saul in 1 Samuel 15:3 and Gideon in Judges 6, 7, 8, which scholars date to around 1050 BCE. It is written that the Amalekites, Midianites, Zebach, and Zalmunna owned camels. Is this an anachronism?
Oh,
No.
possible. Yeah, it's possible,
Okay.
But I encourage you to read this excellent book, The Camel in the Biblical Time. I think I send you the reference of this book.
Yeah.
It is very interesting because you will see exactly because it is archaeologists. It is written by archaeologists who know very well the mention in the Bible of the camel in the Bible. So it is very interesting to read it because they have a lot of proof, archaeological proof and epigraphic proof that the camel was present for a long time in the Middle East and Near East.
Okay. And what about Egypt? Can you say something about that? Did pharaohs or Egyptian kings have camels or what?
Which one? Sorry.
Well, or let's say Ramses II or even earlier.
Well, in Egypt, we know that the camel come in Egypt. There was some publication of the first mention of the camel in Egypt. It was around 1,000 years before Christ. So it's a long time. But as I told you, it is not represented in hieroglyph. So I don't know where this king is living, but probably before 1000 BC, it was not possible to find camel in Egypt. But there was during the first millennium BC and up to the beginning of the Christian era, there was caravan, and there was some camel with they were rent because I I know there was some papyrus. They found some papyrus. They mentioned the renting camel, and they rent camel from Arabian tribe. The people from the Nile River, they rent camel. And they rent camel to Arab tribe. It's been Arab tribe. They came, some breeders, they came to Egypt for working, for carrying some goods, and they go back. So it's been, there, as I told you, there is no camel breeding at that time. The camel breeding come later. And it come later at the beginning of Christian era for two main reasons. The first important reason, it was the aridification of the Sahara. The Sahara become more and more arid. And in that case, the camel was interesting even for the people living in Egypt because the aridification of the milieu. And a second reason of the moving of the camel, not only in Egypt, but all in North Africa, it was the jihad at the beginning of the Hijr. And probably the most important migration of the camel, especially in the North Africa and in the West Africa, was linked to the Muslim invasion. So the camel, it is really linked to Arab. The dromedary camel is very linked to the Arab tribe, to the Arab population, Arab empire. And it was adopted by the other population later. Or more or less because the Jude, they don't breed camel. Actually in Israel, there is 5,000 camel in Israel, actually. Officially, there is 5,000 camels. But they are bred by Palestinians. They are not bred by the Jew population. It's the Palestinian who breed camel. It's not the Israelian. It's not Jude. So it means the youth did not adopted the camel. Uh, Probably the Arab, or I don't know if at that time it was Arab or not, Palestinian, I don't know. I don't want to enter in this debate, which is a little bit political. But it was not adopted by the Jew population, but there was other population. It was adopted by the Sumerian, by the Med, by, I don't know, all these population living especially actual Iraq, Syria, Jordania, all these population, they adopted, but the Jews, they don't adopt it. They don't breed it.
Amazing.
But it's
Okay.
mentioned in the Bible.
Okay. Any conclusion and the message at the end about this topic we talked, or no, or whatever?
Oh, a conclusion, my conclusion, I will propose you a conclusion because recently I published a paper. The title of my paper was Is the Camel Conquering the World? Because, from the beginning of the domestication in the Arabian Peninsula or from Bactrian in Central Asia, now you can see the population of camel. They occupy all the north of Africa, all West Africa, all and even more and more to the southern part. Even we introduce the camel in the southern part of the continent in Africa, in Namibia and Botswana. We have more and more camel farming even in Europe and in USA, and he was also going to Australia. And even, in the eastern part, it is increasing a lot in China and Kazakhstan, in Mongolia, it is increasing. So I say, of course, the title of my paper is a little bit provocation, but it's just to say from the beginning, the small focus in the Saudi Arabia, Arabian Peninsula, 4,000 years ago, approximately, now the camel is invading step by step a lot of parts of the world. And probably the climatic change is a big feature, is a big fact explaining this growing population in the world. Relatively, there is few camel in the world. There are 41 million officially camel in the world. It's very few. If you compare to the cattle, which is 1.5 billion, it's very few. But if you look the growth, the relative growth of the population, it is higher than all other domestic animals. The annual growth of the camel population is around 8%. If you compare to the cattle population, which is 2.5%, something like this. So it means the increasing population is very important, especially since 30, 40 years ago. So I think the camel is the future of the humanity.
Okay, amazing, Dr. Faye. I really enjoyed and thank you for your time. Thank you for joining us on MT Podcast. I hope you enjoyed this insightful conversation with Dr. Faye and learned something new about the fascinating history of camels and their role in the Bible and human civilization. Don't forget to like the video, leave a comment, and share it with your friends. If you would like to support our work, you will find donation information in the video description. Thank you for your support, and we will see you soon in our next episode. Greetings from Serbia.
Thank you to invite me.